They laughed when the young woman raised her hand and bought an old welded-shut metal box for just $100. The auctioneer smirked. The crowd whispered that she had wasted her money on nothing but rusty scrap. But what happened after the box was finally opened left every person in that room speechless, because inside wasn't just a secret, it was a truth someone had spent decades trying to bury. Stay with me until the end, because this isn't just a story about an old box, it's about courage, family, betrayal, and a discovery that changed one woman's life forever. Emma Carter had never imagined that an estate auction would become the turning point of her life. At 26 years old, she worked 2 jobs just to afford the tiny apartment she called home. After losing her grandmother only 6 months earlier, life felt emptier than ever. Her grandmother had always believed that every forgotten object carried a forgotten story. Those words echoed in Emma's mind as she walked through the crowded estate sale on a cool Saturday morning. The estate had belonged to the mysterious Henry Lawson, a man who had lived alone for decades. Neighbors knew very little about him except that he rarely smiled, never threw anything away, and spent countless nights inside an old workshop behind his house. When he passed away without known relatives, everything he owned was placed up for auction. People gathered around antique furniture, expensive paintings, vintage jewelry, and classic watches. Nobody paid attention to a heavy steel box sitting in the corner. Layers of rust covered its surface, and thick welding sealed every edge. There wasn't even a visible lock anymore. "What a useless piece of junk," someone laughed. "Probably empty," another bidder joked. Emma couldn't explain why she couldn't stop looking at it. Something about the box reminded her of her grandmother's stories. She stepped closer and noticed faint letters scratched beneath years of rust. The auctioneer shrugged. "Next item. Unknown welded metal chest. Starting bid, $100. Silence filled the room. No one raised a paddle. Emma hesitated. $100 was almost everything she had saved that month. Buying it made no logical sense. But her grandmother's voice echoed once again. Sometimes the greatest treasures hide behind the strongest doors. Emma slowly lifted her bidding paddle. $100. The crowd burst into laughter. "Congratulations," someone mocked. "You just bought 50 pounds of worthless metal." Emma forced a smile, paid the money, and somehow managed to load the incredibly heavy box into the back of her borrowed pickup truck. Little did anyone know, the impossible weight of that old chest wasn't caused by solid steel alone. Something hidden inside had waited more than 40 years for someone brave enough to find it. Back home, Emma spent hours examining the mysterious box. Every side had been professionally welded shut. Whoever sealed it had never wanted it opened again. She borrowed cutting equipment from a retired mechanic living nearby. Sparks flew across the garage as inch by inch the thick welds finally began giving way. Her heart pounded. After nearly 3 exhausting hours, the final seal cracked open. The heavy lid slowly lifted. Inside wasn't gold. It wasn't diamonds. It wasn't stacks of cash. Instead, Emma found dozens of carefully wrapped journals, faded photographs, military medals, handwritten letters, property deeds, and a small velvet pouch containing a beautiful wedding ring. At first, disappointment crossed her face. Then she opened the first journal. Within minutes, tears filled her eyes. The journals belonged to Henry Lawson himself. Every page revealed a heartbreaking story of love, sacrifice, and betrayal. During his youth, Henry had fallen deeply in love with a woman named Margaret. Before they could marry, powerful relatives separated them, claiming Henry wasn't wealthy enough. Years later, Henry discovered that Margaret had secretly given birth to their daughter. But before he could find them, they disappeared without a trace. Henry spent the rest of his life searching. The welded box wasn't protecting valuables. It was protecting memories. Among the documents Emma discovered official land deeds that had never been transferred. The forgotten property had become extremely valuable over the decades. Even more shocking, one letter contained legal instructions stating that anyone who honestly purchased the sealed chest and preserved its contents should inherit everything connected to it. Emma could hardly believe what she was reading. Lawyers later confirmed every document was authentic. The forgotten land was worth millions. News spread quickly. The same people who laughed at Emma suddenly congratulated her. Some even claimed they had wanted to bid but simply changed their minds. Emma quietly smiled. She knew the truth. It wasn't luck. It wasn't magic. It was faith, the willingness to believe that something overlooked by everyone else could still have value. Instead of spending her newfound wealth on luxury, Emma restored Henry and Margaret's forgotten story. She built a small historical museum displaying their letters and journals so future generations would remember that true love, honesty, and hope can survive even the passage of time. The welded box had hidden far more than documents. It had protected a lifetime of truth until the right person came along. And perhaps that's the greatest lesson of all. Never judge something, or someone, by the rust you can see on the outside. Sometimes the world's greatest treasures are hidden beneath scars, silence, and years of being ignored. The crowd remembered Emma as the woman who bought an old welded-shut box for $100. History remembered her as the woman who opened far more than a forgotten chest. She opened the truth.